Hey friends, thanks so much for stopping by. It's Laurie. Today I'm making a Wayfair inspired sunflower farmhouse wreath, and I'm using mostly supplies from the Dollar Tree. I used the Wayfair inspiration wreath as my base, and then I changed it up to make it my own. Here's the Wayfair sunflower wreath that retails for $75.99, and I use similar flowers from the Dollar Tree to make mine for so much less. Getting started, I'm using an 18-inch grapevine wreath, and I picked it up at Walmart for $4.75. I'm going to try to dupe the Wayfair wreath, so I'm using this stem of yellow sunflowers that I already had on hand. I also picked up a bunch of pretty sunflowers from the Dollar Tree, and they'll work perfect for this project. To start putting my wreath together, I first removed the two sunflowers from the main stem. After they were cut and before I could start crafting, I was interrupted by my cat Emmeline. She's always so curious to see what I'm making. Before I attached the sunflowers, I did remove both of their leaves. I'm using the inspiration wreath as my guide, and I slid both of the sunflowers into place at an angle. I wanted to share with you today that I am participating in the Farmhouse High-End for Cheap collab, hosted by my sweet friends Kiki from Kiki's DIY and Janny and Dyanne from Deco Easy. We'll all be duping some high-end farmhouse projects, so please be sure to check out our hosts, along with the playlist. I'll have them linked below in my description. The Wayfair wreath had small yellow sunflowers, but when I went to the Dollar Tree, I could only find these small white sunflowers, and because I'm changing this up a bit, I think they'll work just great. I bought two bunches, and I'm cutting them into single stems. Now that they're cut, I'm going to try to mimic the Wayfair wreath, and I'm adding them into place. Once they're in place, I'm using a yellow flower that I already had on hand, and I'm tucking it behind my large sunflower. For my brown flowers, I'm using two clusters of these fall hydrangeas that I found at the Dollar Tree. To turn the two bunches into four, I'm using my snippers and I'm clipping each in half. Because these don't tuck tightly into place like my other flowers, I'm going to use my hot glue gun to attach them. At my Dollar Tree, they have some really pretty different colors of sunflowers right now, and I'm going to be using the yellow ones out of these three bunches that I bought. They also have some sunflower picks, so if you're looking for a larger sunflower, these will be perfect. I snipped away two stems of the yellow sunflowers, and using my Wayfair inspiration, I added them to my wreath. Now that I have those in place, I'm going to be adding in some of the smaller white sunflowers. And because these once again have stems, I'm just pushing them into place. One thing I love to do is thrift and recycle. So I'm snipping off the yellow flowers from this old bouquet, and it was part of a past project. Once they were all cut, I used my hot glue gun, and looking at my inspiration wreath, I attached them in place. Because I'm using Dollar Tree supplies and some things I had on hand, my wreath is not going to be an exact match to the Wayfair wreath. Once I have all my yellow flowers attached, I noticed that the Wayfair wreath has two red rose accents. I just so happen to have a recycled rose swag, so I'm going to snip both of these off and use them on my wreath. I then used my glue gun and attached both the roses in place. Near the middle sunflower on the Wayfair wreath, there's a reddish flower accent, So I'm going to use one stem from this Dollar Tree Dripping Blossom. And then using my glue gun, I'm attaching it into place. On the Wayfair wreath, to mimic the two accents on the top, I'm cutting 2 leaves from this Dollar Tree wheat stem, and then I'm using my glue gun to attach them into place. Because I never throw anything away, I have a bag of leaves and little assorted flowers, so I'm going to kind of pick through it and find some greenery for my wreath. I'm trying to mimic the greenery that is on the Wayfair wreath, but you can always use the leaves that came with the flowers that you use, and that will work great too. I ended up finding a few sprigs of yellow flowers and some greenery, so I added that in. Along with my assorted leaves, I want to mimic some of the Wayfair wreath greenery, so I'm using some of these pretty leaves from a stem of Dollar Tree Astilbe. Now all I'm doing is using my glue gun and my finger protector, and I'm starting to add the leaves in between all the flowers to fill out the space. I clipped off some of the Astilbe leaves and I mimicked the placement using the Wayfair wreath. When I was done, and if any of you ever watch me in any of my other wreath videos, you know that I really have to stop myself from adding things. So I did go off script here and I added in a couple of extra leaves and flowers. To finish up the top part of my wreath, I used my glue gun and I added in some leaves and a couple of extra accent flowers. I'm using the Wayfair wreath as my inspiration, and although I'm changing it up to make it my own, if you want to dupe it almost exactly, the Dollar Tree has a great assortment of flowers to use. To mimic the Wayfair wreath, I'm hot gluing in a couple of pieces of Astilbe leaves to the side. I purposely left an opening between the 2 sunflowers because I want to make this wreath my own, and I'm going to be adding in a loopy bow. I found this really pretty green ribbon at the Dollar Tree, and I think the color will complement the wreath. I'm making 2 bows, so you're going to need a piece of floral wire and a clip to hold the first bow together. To make my bow, I'm measuring out an 8-inch tail, and then I'm pinching it together. I'm then measuring out 12 inches of ribbon to make my loop, and then I'm measuring out another 12 inches of ribbon to make my next loop, and then I'm measuring out 8 inches for my last tail. I'm then pinching between my 2 loops and having the clip hold my bow together. I then made my next bow to match my first, an 8-inch tail, 2 12-inch loops, and then another 8-inch tail. I then removed the clip from my first bow and then placed one of my bows on top of the other. I then used my floral wire. I wrapped it over the top of the 2 bows. I pulled it tightly and then gave it a good twist. I fluffed up my loops and dovetailed the end of each ribbon. To dovetail is super easy. All you need to do is fold over the end of the ribbon, and then I just cut it away at an angle. Now that my bow is complete, I'm placing it in the open area between the 2 sunflowers. I'm wrapping the floral wire around the sides of the wreath, and then I'm twisting it on tightly. I gave my bow a little fluff, and then I lightly curled the 4 ends around my finger. To make sure that my bow didn't move, I then added a dot of hot glue underneath. I found this cute sign, "Bless this home," on a stake at the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to remove all 3 signs from it. Now Now that I have them all detached, I'm going to attach them to my wreath. I centered and evenly spaced the words on the side of my wreath, and then using my hot glue gun, I hot glued them into place. To add on another Wayfair wreath accent, I'm using a few strands of grass from my Dollar Tree wheat stem. And then I'm randomly adding them here and there on the side of my wreath. The final accent that I'll be adding from my inspirational Wayfair fall wreath is a butterfly. I found these at the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use the white butterfly for my wreath. The butterfly is wired, so I just bent the wings over to give it a more realistic look. I added some hot glue to the back, and then I just placed it in the center of my bow. The Wayfair sunflower wreath retails for $75.99, and my version, using a Walmart grapevine wreath and some Dollar Tree supplies, retails for about $14.75. And with that, my Wayfair fall farmhouse inspired wreath with a little twist of my own is complete. Thanks so much for stopping by and hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed making this wreath. If you're new and you haven't yet subscribed and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. I'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.